I'm Chloe, 34 female. I live in a city I love, in an apartment I own, with a career as a creative director that I built from the ground up. I always thought my life was a testament to hard work, but to my family, it was just a series of choices they didn't understand. I always knew I was the family's black sheep, but I never expected my own father to announce it to a crowd of 100 people. They wanted entertainment. I gave them a show they'd never forget. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. The idea for the Vance family grand reunion was born from a place of desperation, though I wouldn't have admitted it at the time. I called it an act of generosity. My father, Richard, was turning 62, and my mother had been dropping hints for months about doing something special. In our family, something special was code for something expensive, something impressive, and something that my younger sister, Alina, could plaster all over her social media. For years, I had occupied the strange role of the family ATM and logistical manager, a position I had neither applied for nor enjoyed, but had fallen into through a combination of competence and a deep, pathetic need for their approval. I was the reliable one, the one who could get things done. Alina was the one they were proud of. At 28, Alina was a social media influencer. Her life was a curated gallery of sponsored brunches, borrowed designer clothes, and aspirational quotes typed over pictures of sunsets she didn't actually watch. My parents spoke of her follower count as if it were a measure of her soul's worth. Alina has 200,000 people who love her, my mother would say, her voice swelling with pride. They never mentioned that my ad campaigns reached millions of people daily, or that my salary was the reason Alina could afford the downtown loft that served as her primary photo backdrop. To them, my job was a confusing tangle of corporate jargon, whereas Alina's was simple, glamorous, and visible. So, when the reunion idea came up, I saw a chance. A foolish, flickering hope ignited within me. If I could pull this off, if I could create a weekend so perfect, so undeniably wonderful, they would finally have to see me. Not just as a resource, but as a daughter. I pitched the idea of renting out the stunning lakeside lodge an hour out of the city, a place known for its rustic elegance and exorbitant prices. A whole weekend, I proposed over a tense family dinner. We can have everyone come in. The cousins from out of state, old friends. We'll have a big dinner Saturday night and a farewell brunch on Sunday. My treat. My father, Richard, a man whose approval was a currency I had never managed to earn, looked up from his steak. He had the perpetually unimpressed look of a retired sales manager who believes everyone is trying to pull one over on him. Must be nice to have that kind of money to throw around, he grunted. It wasn't a thank you. It was an accusation. It's for you, Dad, I said, forcing a smile. For the family. Alina, of course, was ecstatic. Oh my God, Chloe, the lodge? The content I could get there would be insane. The lighting in the Oak Room is legendary. She was already tapping away on her phone, likely scouting photo ops. My grand gesture of familial love was, to her, a work trip. The only person who seemed to see the gesture for what it was my Aunt Carol, my dad's younger sister. She was a librarian, a woman who moved through the world with a quiet gentleness that felt alien in the sharp-edged Vance family. She caught my eye across the table and gave me a small, worried smile. It was a look that said, I see what you're doing, and I'm not sure it's worth the cost. But I was determined. For the next 3 months, I became a professional event planner on top of my demanding job. I was on the phone with the venue coordinator daily, negotiating menus with caterers, arranging room blocks, and designing elegant, minimalist invitations that were met with a shrug from my mother. A bit plain, aren't they? She'd commented, holding the thick, cream-colored cardstock as if it were a utility bill. I pored over every detail, wanting everything to be flawless. I chose a seasonal menu featuring locally sourced ingredients, a string quartet to play during dinner, and floral arrangements with peonies and eucalyptus that cost more than my first car. Every single deposit, every payment, every contractual obligation was signed by me and paid for with my high-limit credit card. I kept a meticulous folder with every receipt and every agreement, not for any particular reason other than it's how I'm wired. I'm a professional who manages million-dollar projects. Organizing a family reunion was, in practice, simple. It was emotional investment that was draining me. With each payment I made, the hope grew. This time, it would be different. They would walk into that magnificent lodge, see the effort and love I had poured into every detail, and the years of being second best, of being the other daughter, would melt away. They would finally be proud. It was a fantasy, a story I told myself late at night when the stress of it all kept me awake. The weekend finally arrived. I drove up to the lodge on Friday afternoon to make sure everything was perfect before the guests started arriving. The main hall was breathtaking. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the massive stone fireplace and the heavy wooden beams crisscrossing the vaulted ceiling. The tables were already being set for the following night, and the scent of fresh flowers and lemon polish filled the air. For a moment, standing there alone, I felt a surge of pride. I did this, I made this happen. My family arrived an hour later. My father walked in, surveyed the grand hall, and his first words were, "Hope you got a good deal on this place. Looks drafty." My mother immediately started pointing out things Alina would love for her photos. "Ellie, look at that staircase. You could get a beautiful shot there." Alina was already filming, narrating for her followers. "Hey guys, welcome to the Vance family reunion. My amazing sister put this all together. She's like a total organization wizard." She panned the camera over to me for a second, giving a thumbs up before turning it back to herself. I was a production credit in the movie of her life. Throughout that first evening and into the next day, the pattern continued. I was the event coordinator, the fixer. When a cousin's room key didn't work, they called me. When someone needed to know the Wi-Fi password, they found me. When my mother decided she didn't like the placement of her table for dinner, I was the one who had to have an awkward conversation with the manager. I was a ghost in the machine of my own party, a phantom ensuring everyone else's happiness while my own was draining away. My Aunt Carol found me by the fireplace late Saturday afternoon, just a few hours before the main event. She handed me a cup of tea. "It's beautiful, Chloe, all of it," she said softly. "You've done an incredible job." Tears pricked my eyes. It was the first genuine compliment I'd received all weekend. "Thanks, Aunt Carol. I wanted it to be perfect." "It is," she said, then she hesitated. "But are you okay? You look exhausted." I gave her a weak smile. "Just tired, it's a lot to manage." She looked at me with her knowing eyes, the ones that missed nothing. "They don't deserve what you do for them, you know." I wanted to believe she was wrong. I desperately needed her to be wrong. "It's fine," I lied, taking a sip of the tea. "Tonight is the big night. It will all be worth it." As I walked away to get ready for dinner, I could feel her gaze on my back. It was a look of pity, and I hated it. I didn't want pity. I wanted respect. I wanted love. And I was convinced that in a few short hours, under the warm glow of the chandeliers I had hand-selected, I would finally get it. The gilded cage I had built for my family was perfect in every way. I just hadn't realized it was still a cage, and I was the one trapped inside. The price of admission was my dignity, and the bill was about to come due. The main event began just as the sun dipped below the lake, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. The grand hall, which had been impressive in the daylight, was now transformed into something magical. Hundreds of candles flickered on the tables, their light dancing off the crystal glasses and polished silverware. The string quartet played softly in the corner, a gentle melody that wove through the low hum of conversation and laughter. Nearly 100 people, family, extended family, and old friends, were seated, their faces illuminated by the warm glow. From my seat, I watched them, a small, fragile part of me preening. This was my creation. This beauty, this warmth, this moment of togetherness, I had made it all possible. Alina was in her element. She wore a shimmering silver dress that caught the light with every move, a stark contrast to my simple, elegant navy blue one. She drifted from table to table, air-kissing cheeks and laughing, always with her phone in hand, capturing every curated moment for her audience. At one point, I saw her posing dramatically by the floral centerpiece on the main table, her expression one of deep, manufactured sincerity. "So blessed to be surrounded by family," she had likely typed as a caption. I felt a familiar pang of resentment, which I quickly swallowed. Tonight wasn't about her. It was about my father. It was about the family. Dinner was served and the food was exquisite. Course after course arrived, perfectly cooked and beautifully presented. The wine I had selected flowed freely, and the mood in the room was buoyant. People were catching up, reminiscing, laughing. For a fleeting moment, I allowed myself to relax. I thought, this is it. This is working. My father was holding court at his table, telling one of his old sales stories. My mother was smiling. Even Alina had put her phone down to eat. After the dessert plates were cleared, the venue manager discreetly handed me a wireless microphone. "For the speeches," he whispered with a nod. I walked it over to the head table and placed it next to my father's wine glass. This was the moment I had been waiting for. The speeches were a tradition at our family gatherings. They were meant to be heartfelt, a time for expressing love and gratitude. I expected my father to thank everyone for coming, to say a few words about the importance of family, and maybe, just maybe, to acknowledge the person who had orchestrated the entire weekend. I didn't need a parade in my honor, just a simple, "Thank you, Chloe." That's all I wanted. My father stood up, tapping the microphone, and a hush fell over the room. He beamed, his face flushed with wine and attention. "Wow," he began, his voice booming slightly through the speakers. "Look at all of you. It does an old man's heart good to see all these faces in one place." He paused for appreciative laughter. "We've had a wonderful weekend here at this very fancy place." Another chuckle rippled through the crowd. I felt a knot of anticipation tighten in my stomach. "I've been a lucky man," he continued, his eyes scanning the room. "Lucky in business, lucky in life, but my greatest fortune has been my family. My wonderful wife, my extended family here tonight, and of course, my 2 daughters." He gestured vaguely in our direction. My heart started to beat a little faster. He then launched into a lengthy tribute to Alina. He talked about her bravery in pursuing a modern career, her tenacity, and the joy she brought them by sharing her life with the world. He recounted a story about how she had managed to get a free hotel upgrade by mentioning her follower count, telling it as if she had personally negotiated a peace treaty. "She's a star," he concluded, his voice thick with emotion. "She shines so brightly, and every day she makes her mother and me so incredibly proud." Alina positively glowed, blowing him a small kiss from her seat. I waited, my smile felt frozen on my face. It was my turn. Surely he would say something about me now. He had set the stage perfectly. He had 2 daughters. He'd praised one, now for the other. He cleared his throat, taking a sip of water. He looked out at the crowd again, a strange, almost mischievous glint in his eye. "You know," he said, his tone shifting from sentimental to performative, "people say you can't have favorites, that you're supposed to love all your kids the same." He paused, letting the statement hang in the air. The room was silent, waiting. And then he delivered the line that would echo in my mind for years. "But I'll be honest with you all tonight. Only one of my kids has ever made me truly proud, and it isn't this one." He gestured dismissively in my direction. My direction, he didn't even use my name, I was just this one. The words hit me with a physical force, like a punch to the gut. The air left my lungs. For a split second, there was a stunned, collective intake of breath from the 100 people in the room. No one knew how to react. Was it a joke? It had to be a joke. A horribly cruel, terribly unfunny joke, but a joke nonetheless. My mind scrambled, trying to find a context for his words that didn't involve pure, unadulterated malice. But then the spell was broken. Alina, my shining star of a sister, let out a short, sharp laugh. She started clapping, slowly at first, then with more vigor. She looked right at me, a smug, triumphant smirk on her face, and said, loud enough for our entire table to hear, "Guess you're just the entertainment tonight." And with that, the dam of social etiquette broke. A few people, my father's old buddies, started to chuckle nervously. The nervous chuckles grew into scattered laughter. They had their cue. It was a joke after all, and I was the punchline. My humiliation was the price of their comfort. I looked around the room, my eyes searching for a friendly face, for someone to look as horrified as I felt. I saw a few cousins staring down at their plates, a couple of my mom's friends with tight, uncomfortable smiles. And I saw Aunt Carol, across the room, her face a mask of shock and sorrow. She started to stand up, but I gave her the slightest shake of my head. Don't make it worse. My father was still standing there, basking in the laughter he had generated at my expense. He saw it as a success, a well-delivered line that had landed perfectly. He didn't see the shrapnel. He didn't see the way the light in my eyes had extinguished. He didn't me at all. In that moment, something inside me didn't just break, it vaporized. It turned to dust and blew away. The years of trying, of hoping, of paying, of planning, all of it was for nothing. The desperate need for his approval, the ache for their love, it all just stopped. It was replaced by a profound, chilling calm. The emotional pain was so immense that my body just shut it down, replacing it with a quiet, clear-eyed emptiness. I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I didn't make a scene. I looked at my father, still grinning with the microphone in his hand. I looked at my sister, who was now whispering and giggling with our mother. I looked at the room full of people who were laughing at my expense, enjoying the dinner I had paid for, in the venue I had booked. And I smiled. It wasn't a real smile. It was a mask, a polite, vacant curve of the lips. I stood up slowly, my movements deliberate. I picked up my small clutch purse from the table. I smoothed down my dress. Then, without a word, I turned and walked away from the table, my head held high. The string quartet, oblivious, started playing a cheerful Vivaldi piece. It was the soundtrack to the end of my life as I knew it. The walk from my table to the grand entrance of the lodge felt like a mile. Every step was measured, each footfall on the polished oak floor echoing in the cavernous space of my own mind. The sounds of the party, the laughter, the music, the clinking of glasses seemed to warp and fade as if I were underwater. I could feel the eyes on my back, 100 pairs of them, tracking my silent departure. Let them watch. They had already made it clear what they thought of me. I was the entertainment, and my final act was leaving the stage. No one tried to stop me. Not my mother, not a single cousin, not an uncle. They were either too stunned, too uncomfortable, or simply didn't care enough to intervene. Their inaction was as damning as my father's words. It was a collective verdict. As I reached the massive double doors, I saw the reflection of the party in the glass. It looked like a beautiful, warm painting of a happy family, a perfect illusion that I had paid for. I pushed the door open and stepped out into the crisp night air. It was cold, and the shock of it on my heated skin was a welcome sensation. It felt real. The air smelled of pine and damp earth, a clean scent that was a stark contrast to the cloying sweetness of the perfume and overpriced flowers inside. I walked down the stone steps and along the path to the parking lot, my heels crunching softly on the gravel. I didn't have a coat, having left it at my table, but I barely felt the chill. A coldness far deeper had settled in my bones. I got into my car, the interior dark and quiet. I sat there for a long moment, my hands gripping the steering wheel, and just breathed. In, out, in, out. The silence was a balm. There were no tears yet. The wound was too fresh, too raw for tears. Instead, there was a strange and terrifying clarity. It was the kind of clarity that comes after a high fever breaks, when the world seems sharp and new. The elaborate construction of my relationship with my family, the delicate scaffolding of hope and duty I had built and maintained for decades, had been demolished in a single sentence. All that was left was the truth, stark and ugly. They did not love me. They did not respect me. They tolerated me for my utility. I started the car and pulled out of the parking lot, not looking back. The lodge, with its warmly lit windows, receded in my rearview mirror until it was just another light in the darkness. The drive back to the city was an hour-long blur. I kept the radio off, letting the silence of the car fill with my thoughts. The humiliation played on a loop in my head, my father's smug face, Elinor's mocking laugh, the sea of smiling faces. With each replay, the hurt began to subside, replaced by something else. A slow, cold burn. It wasn't the hot, messy rage I might have expected. It was a quiet, focused anger. an anger that demanded not tears but action. By the time I pulled into the garage of my apartment building, the decision had begun to form. It wasn't a fully fledged plan yet, but the core of it was there. They valued my money, my ability to provide. That was the only power I held in their eyes, the only language they truly understood. For years, I had used that power to try and buy their affection. What would happen if I used it to take something away? I let myself into my apartment, the familiar click of the lock echoing in the quiet space. I had designed this place myself. It was my sanctuary, filled with art I loved and books I'd read. It was a reflection of me, the real me, the one my family had never bothered to see. I walked through the living room and stood in front of the large window overlooking the city skyline. The endless grid of lights stretched out before me, a million lives playing out in the buildings below. I felt incredibly small and, for the first time, incredibly free. I was no longer bound by the desperate need to please them. The shock was finally wearing off, and the pain began to seep in, sharp and deep. A single tear traced a path down my cheek, then another. I let them fall. It wasn't a breakdown, but a release. I was grieving. Grieving the family I thought I could earn, the father I wished I had, the sister I never connected with. I was mourning the death of a hope I had carried for 34 years. After a few minutes, I wiped my eyes. The grief was real, but it wouldn't consume me. I walked over to my home office, a sleek, organized space where I did some of my best work. I sat down in my comfortable leather chair and turned on my laptop. The screen illuminated my face in the darkroom. My fingers flew across the keyboard. I opened the file on my desktop labeled Vance Reunion. Inside was every document, every contract, every receipt. I opened the master spreadsheet where I had tracked every single expense, from the six-figure venue booking to the $50 charge for extra napkins. My name was on everything. My credit card number was on every payment authorization. The weekend wasn't just my treat. Legally and financially, it was my property. The theme of the reunion, printed on the invitations I had designed, was celebrating family ties. What a bitter irony. My father had taken a microphone and publicly severed those ties. My sister had laughed while he did it. The contract with the venue, the caterers, the musicians, it was all for an event that was, in spirit, no longer taking place. The pretense of a happy family celebration had been shattered. My plan solidified. It was no longer a vague idea but a clear, step-by-step procedure. It was cold, methodical, and utterly ruthless. Some might call it petty revenge. I called it a breach of contract. The agreement was that I would provide a beautiful weekend, and they, in turn, would act like a family. They had failed to hold up their end of the bargain. I took a deep breath. My hands were steady as I picked up my phone. I looked up the 24/7 concierge number for my premium credit card. This wasn't just about getting my money back. It was about making a statement. It was about turning off the lights, locking the doors, and walking away from the gilded cage for good. They wanted entertainment. The show was just getting started. And for the first time, I was going to be the one writing the script. The quiet exit was over. The loud decision had been made. The first call was the most important one. It was to the premium credit card company that I used for all my major business and personal expenses. Their concierge service was available 24/7, a perk I had rarely used but was about to be profoundly grateful for. I rehearsed my words as the phone rang, wanting to sound calm, rational, and in control. This wasn't a hysterical, emotional call. This was a business transaction going sour. A polite, professional voice answered on the second ring. "Good evening, Ms. Vance. How may I assist you tonight?" "Hello," I began, my own voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil inside me. "I need to report an issue with a series of charges related to an event booking. The vendor has created a hostile and untenable environment, fundamentally altering the nature of the service provided." I used corporate language deliberately. It was the language of power, the language they would understand. I explained the situation without melodrama. I told the representative that I had booked a full weekend package at the Lakeside Lodge for a private family event. I described how the primary beneficiary of the event, my father, had used the platform I provided to publicly humiliate me in front of all the guests. I explained that the event was no longer the family celebration it was contracted to be, but had become a public spectacle at my expense, causing significant emotional distress. The continuation of the event tomorrow is impossible under these circumstances, I stated firmly. The terms of the service have been breached in spirit, if not in letter. The representative was quiet for a moment. I understand, Ms. Vance. That sounds like a deeply unpleasant experience. Let's look at the charges. He pulled up my account. The numbers were staggering. The deposit for the lodge, the payment for the caterer, the fee for the musicians, the florist. And then there was the big one, the final payment for the venue and the full payment for the Sunday brunch, both of which were scheduled to be processed automatically in the morning. Okay, Ms. Vance, the representative said. For services already rendered, tonight's dinner, for example, a chargeback can be complex. We would have to open a formal dispute, and the merchant would have a chance to respond. I understand that, I said, but what about the services not yet rendered? The full-day venue hire for Sunday and the brunch for 100 people that is supposed to happen in about 10 hours. Those services have not been delivered. Ah, he said, a shift in his tone. That is a different matter entirely. You are well within your rights to cancel payment for services not yet performed. We can place an immediate stop payment on any pending charges scheduled for tomorrow. I can do that for you right now. Please do, I said, a wave of relief washing over me. Stop everything scheduled for tomorrow. I heard the click of his keyboard. All right, Ms. Vance. I have placed a stop payment order on the pending charges from the Lakeside Lodge and from Artisan Caterers. They will not be processed. I've also flagged the initial deposit for the lodge for a formal dispute. We will open an investigation on your behalf, citing misrepresentation of the event environment and failure to ensure a safe and respectful atmosphere for the billable client, which is you. Thank you, I said, my voice barely a whisper. That's exactly what I needed. After I hung up, I felt the first real surge of power. This was my world. Contracts, transactions, terms of service. My father and sister, with their outdated ideas of power and their modern world of fleeting online fame, didn't understand this world. They were about to get a crash course. Next, I opened my email. It was time to create a paper trail. I drafted a formal, dispassionate email to the general manager of the Lakeside Lodge. Subject: urgent cancellation of event services for Sunday booking 7432, Vance. Dear Mr. Henderson, please be advised that I am formally withdrawing from the remainder of the event scheduled for this weekend under the booking reference above, due to a severe and unforeseen personal incident that occurred during the Saturday evening dinner. An incident which has rendered the environment hostile and untenable for myself, the client. I will not be utilizing the venue or any associated services for the scheduled brunch on Sunday. As the services for Sunday have not yet been rendered, I have instructed my credit card company to place a stop payment on all pending charges related to Sunday's activities. This includes the second half of the venue hire fee and all costs associated with the farewell brunch. I regret any inconvenience this may cause your staff. However, the integrity of the event has been irrevocably compromised by the actions of other attendees, making my continuation as host impossible. Sincerely, Chloe Vance. I hit send. It was professional, legally sound, and gave away nothing of the raw emotion behind it. I drafted a similar email to the catering company, informing them that their services for Sunday brunch were no longer required, and that payment had been stopped. I leaned back in my chair, the glow of the monitor illuminating my face. The digital strike was complete. The financial gears were now grinding to a halt. I knew what would happen next. The venue manager would get my email in the morning. He would see the stopped payment notification from his bank. He would approach my family, who would be blissfully unaware, likely nursing hangovers and expecting a lovely, prepaid brunch to appear. He would present them with a bill, a very, very large bill, and demand immediate payment for them to continue their stay. My family, who had lived off my generosity for so long, would be faced with a reality they had never considered, a world where my money was not theirs to command. My father, a retired man on a pension, couldn't cover a fraction of it. My mother had no independent income. And Alina, for all her 200,000 followers, likely had more brand deal clothes in her closet than actual cash in her bank account. Her lifestyle was a carefully constructed illusion, propped up by freebies and funded by me. I thought about the chaos that would erupt. The confusion, the panic, the frantic calls to me. The sheer, unadulterated rage my father would feel when he was publicly embarrassed in front of the very same people he had tried to impress just hours earlier. The irony was so thick, so potent, it was almost poetic. He had made me the butt of a joke to elevate his own status. Now, his status was about to be revoked in the most public way possible. I closed my laptop. The apartment was completely silent again. There was no joy in what I had done, no triumphant laughter, just a cold, grim satisfaction, the satisfaction of a debt being settled. They had wanted to make it clear that I wasn't truly part of the family. I was simply making that official. I was removing myself from the equation, and I was taking my checkbook with me. The longest night of my life was just beginning, but I knew, with absolute certainty, that the morning would bring a reckoning. With the emails sent and the payments canceled, there was nothing left to do but wait. The adrenaline that had fueled my methodical revenge began to recede, leaving a hollow, aching void in its place. I stood up from my desk and walked back to the living room window, wrapping my arms around myself. The city lights, which had seemed so promising just an hour ago, now felt lonely. Each light was a home, a place where families might be sleeping, or arguing, or laughing. My family was just an hour away, sleeping in luxurious beds I had paid for, completely oblivious to the fact that their world was set to implode at dawn. The weight of my decision settled on me. Was it too much? Was it a cruel, vindictive act that made me no better than them? The questions looped in my mind, a chorus of doubt. For a moment, I was tempted to undo it all. To call the credit card company back, to send a follow-up email, to pretend none of it had happened. I could have gone back to the lodge in the morning, smile plastered on my face, and endured the brunch, the fake apologies, and the simmering resentment. I could have continued to play the part of the dutiful, forgiving daughter. But the memory of my father's face, smug and triumphant after delivering his punchline, stopped me. The image of my sister's clapping hands, her mocking smile, the sound of the laughter. No, there was no going back. Going back would be a betrayal of myself. It would be telling them that their behavior was acceptable, that my dignity was a commodity they could trample on whenever they felt like it. I spent the next few hours drifting through my apartment like a ghost. I made tea I didn't drink. I picked up a book I didn't read. I scrolled aimlessly through my phone, my thumb hovering over my family members' contact information. I saw a picture Alina had posted just before dinner. A selfie of her, my mom, and my dad, all beaming. The caption read, "The best weekend with my favorite people. Red family first blessed." The hypocrisy was so blatant it was almost comical. Around 2 a.m., my phone buzzed. It was a text from a number I didn't recognize at first, but then I realized it was my Aunt Carol. I had forgotten she had gotten a new phone. "Chloe, are you home? Are you safe?" My fingers trembled as I typed back, "I'm home, I'm okay." A moment later, her name flashed on the screen. She was calling me. I hesitated, then answered, my voice raspy. "Hello." "Oh, Chloe, honey." Her voice was thick with concern. "I am so sorry about what happened tonight. What your father said, it was monstrous. There's no other word for it." Hearing her say it, hearing the validation in her voice, made the tears I'd been holding back finally start to fall. They came silently at first, then turned into quiet, racking sobs. I muffled the sound with my hand, not wanting to break down completely. "I saw you leave," she continued, her voice soft. "I wanted to go after you, but your mother gave me a look that could freeze fire. They're all pretending it was some kind of harmless roast. They're furious that you couldn't take a joke." "It wasn't a joke," I choked out. Of course it wasn't, she said fiercely. It was cruel. It was the cruelest thing I've ever seen. I don't know what has gotten into your father, what has been wrong with him for years, but you didn't deserve that. Nobody does. We stayed on the phone for nearly an hour. I didn't tell her what I had done. I couldn't bring myself to say it out loud just yet. It felt like a dark secret, a powerful spell that would break if I spoke of it. But I let her listen as I talked about the years of feeling invisible, of my accomplishments being dismissed, while Aliner's every minor achievement was celebrated with a parade. I talked about the hope I had pinned on this weekend, and how foolish I felt for ever believing it could change anything. Aunt Carol listened patiently, validating every feeling, every frustration. You know, your father was always competitive, she said thoughtfully. When we were kids, he had to be the best at everything. I think in some strange, twisted way, he's competitive with you. Your success intimidates him. He can't understand it, so he belittles it. Aliner is easy. She's a reflection of him. She needs him, you don't. And that scares him. Her words were like a key, unlocking a room in my mind I had never dared to enter. It wasn't about me not being good enough. It was about me being too good. My independence wasn't a flaw, it was a threat. My success wasn't a disappointment, it was an indictment of his own perceived shortcomings. You have to stop trying, Chloe, Aunt Carol said, her voice firm but kind. You have to let go of the idea of the family you wish you had and accept the one you've got. And then you have to decide how much of it you're willing to let into your life. I think I made that decision tonight, I said, my voice quiet but sure. Good, she replied. It's about time you chose yourself. You deserve to be chosen. After we hung up, a sense of peace settled over me. The doubt was gone. Aunt Carol's words had been the final piece of confirmation I needed. I wasn't a vindictive monster. I was a woman drawing a boundary, a line in the sand that had been crossed for the last time. I finally laid down to sleep as the first hints of dawn began to lighten the sky. I knew I wouldn't sleep for long. The storm was coming. My phone was on the nightstand, set to silent. I didn't want to be woken by the first frantic text or the first angry call. I wanted to wake up on my own terms, in my own time. When I did, I would be ready to face the fallout. The longest night was over. And as I closed my eyes, I felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time. The quiet, steady hum of my own power. I woke up naturally around 8 o'clock, which was later than I had expected. The sun was streaming through my bedroom window, and for a blissful, disoriented moment, I forgot what day it was. Then, reality crashed back in. It was Sunday morning. Brunch at the lodge was supposed to have started an hour ago. The curtain was about to rise on the final act of my tragic family comedy. I got out of bed, put on a pot of strong coffee, and went through my morning routine with a deliberate, almost meditative slowness. I wasn't stalling, I was centering myself. I knew that once I turned my phone off silent mode, my peace would be shattered. I needed to be grounded ready. At precisely 9:01 a.m., with a hot mug of coffee in my hand, I sat on my sofa, took a deep breath, and tapped the little bell icon on my phone screen. The deluge was instantaneous. My screen lit up with a blinding fusillade of notifications. Texts, missed calls, voicemails. It was a digital tidal wave of panic and fury. I took a sip of coffee and started at the top. The first texts were from Aliner, beginning at 8:15 a.m. 8:15 a.m. Hey, are you coming back for brunch? Mom is asking. 8:32 a.m. Where are you? The coffee isn't ready and the staff looks stressed. 8:45 a.m. Chloe, the manager just came over to our table. He's saying there's a problem with the payment. 8:48 a.m. What did you do? 8:50 a.m. He's saying the payment for today was canceled. Call me right now. This isn't funny. 8:55 a.m. They're kicking us out. In front of everyone, I am literally being thrown out. MY followers are going to hear about this. This is the worst day of MY life. I scrolled past her messages, a strange detachment washing over me. There was no apology, no concern for why I had left, just pure, self-absorbed panic. Next came the missed calls, 12 from a leaner, 8 from my mother, and 5 from a number I knew belonged to my father. Then, the voicemails. I pressed play on the first one from my dad, holding the phone slightly away from my ear. His voice, usually so booming and confident, was a tight, strangled roar. "Chloe, you call me back this instant. The manager here is making some insane claim that you canceled the payment. You fix this. You fix this right now. You have embarrassed this family in a way I never thought possible. After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us. With this childish, selfish tantrum, you are an ungrateful brat and you will fix this now." I deleted the voicemail without listening to the end. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. He was accusing me of embarrassing the family just hours after he had publicly disowned me in front of them. The complete and utter lack of self-awareness was almost impressive. The next voicemail was from my mother. She was crying. "Chloe, honey, please. I don't know what's going on, but people are starting to leave. The manager is standing here with a bill for thousands of dollars. Your father he's yelling. Please just call and fix it. We can talk about whatever it is that upset you later. Just please make this go away." Her plea was pathetic. She wasn't asking because she cared about my feelings. She was asking because she was uncomfortable, and she wanted me, the family fixer, to make her discomfort disappear. I listened to one more, a garbled, frantic message from a cousin. "Chloe, oh my God, you have to hear this. Your dad just tried to pay the bill with his credit card and it was declined. He's turning purple. People are walking out and grabbing their bags. It's total chaos. What on earth happened?" I could picture the scene perfectly. My proud, boastful father, the big man, being told his card was no good in front of his friends and family. The caterers packing up the untouched brunch buffet. The hotel staff, polite but firm, asking guests to please vacate the premises as the booking was no longer valid. The Vance family grand reunion, ending not with a whimper, but with a bang, the bang of a credit card machine spitting out a declined slip. I finished my coffee and began the methodical process of blocking their numbers. Eleanor was first, then my mother, then my father. I went through my contact list and blocked aunts, uncles, and cousins whom I knew would just be calling on their behalf. I left Aunt Carol's number untouched. As I was doing, a text came in from an unknown number. I knew it had to be one of them, using someone else's phone. It was from my father. "You have been cut off. You are no longer a part of this family. Don't ever contact us again." I stared at the message, then let out a short, sharp laugh. The irony was so rich, so perfect. He was firing me from a job I had already quit. He was throwing me out of a house I had already burned down. I typed out a single reply, the only one I would ever send. "I know, I quit yesterday. You just didn't notice." Then I blocked that number too. I sat back on my sofa, the silence in my apartment a stark contrast to the chaos I had unleashed. I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt quiet. The knot of anxiety and resentment that had lived in my stomach for as long as I could remember was gone. In its place was a vast, empty space. It wasn't a painful emptiness. It was a clean slate, a blank page. The morning after was not about celebrating their defeat. It was about acknowledging my own freedom. The phone was quiet now. The angry voices were silenced. For the first time in my life, I was completely and utterly on my own, and I had never felt more powerful. They had taken my dignity for granted, but I had shown them what it cost. It cost everything. The weeks that followed the reunion were a strange mixture of peaceful silence and administrative battles. The Lakeside Lodge, unsurprisingly, threatened legal action. I forwarded the emails to the lawyer I had placed on retainer the Monday after the event. She was a sharp, no-nonsense woman who, after hearing the story and reviewing the email chain, told me, "They don't have a leg to stand on regarding the Sunday services. They might try to come after you for perceived damages, but the paper trail you created is excellent. Let me handle it." And she did. After a few threatening letters were exchanged, the lodge, likely realizing the bad press from a public lawsuit would be more damaging than the financial loss, went silent. My credit card company, after their investigation, sided with me, and finalized the chargeback on the initial deposit, citing the venue's failure to provide a non-hostile environment for their client. I had won. There was no contact from my family. I had built a digital fortress around myself, and they made no attempt to scale it. I heard through the grapevine, Aunt Carol, that they had crafted a narrative that painted me as an unstable, overly sensitive drama queen who had a psychotic break over a harmless joke. They told everyone I had pre-planned the whole thing to hurt them. In their version of the story, they were the victims of my inexplicable cruelty. Hearing this didn't even hurt anymore. It was exactly what I expected. Their inability to take any responsibility was the very reason I had to leave. They would never change, and I had finally, blessedly, stopped wanting them to. Aunt Carol and I met for lunch about a month after the incident. She looked at me from across the table in a quiet little cafe, her eyes full of a sad understanding. "They're a mess," she said, stirring her iced tea. "Your father is furious, but mostly I think he's embarrassed. You called his bluff. Your mother just cries and says she doesn't know what she did to deserve this. And Aliner." Well, Aliner had to post a long, vague story on her Instagram about overcoming family toxicity to explain why she suddenly had no reunion photos to share. She's trying to spin it for sympathy. "Of course she is," I said with a sigh. "That's her brand." "How are you really?" Aunt Carol asked, her gaze direct. I thought for a moment before answering. "I'm lighter," I said, and I was surprised by how true it felt. For my entire life, I've been carrying this massive weight. The weight of their expectations, their disappointment, their judgment. I didn't even realize how heavy it was until it was gone. Now, I just feel like myself. I'm not the other daughter anymore. I'm just Chloe. The emptiness I had felt on that Sunday morning had slowly begun to fill up, not with anger or grief, but with new possibilities. I poured the energy I used to spend managing my family's feelings into my own life. I started taking pottery classes on Tuesday nights, something I'd always wanted to do. My hands, covered in clay, felt more productive than they ever had signing checks for my family. I reconnected with old friends, the ones who had slowly drifted away, because I was always too busy with some manufactured family crisis. I threw a dinner party in my apartment, and the sound of genuine, easy laughter filling the space felt like a form of cleansing. My work thrived. Without the constant background hum of family stress, my mind was clearer, my ideas sharper. I led my team to win our agency's biggest account of the year. The day we got the news, my boss pulled me aside and told me how impressed he was with my leadership and vision. That prize, earned and freely given by a respected colleague, felt more validating than anything my father had ever said to me. 6 months after the reunion, I took a solo trip to Italy. It was something I had dreamed of for years but had always put off, telling myself I couldn't be away from home for that long in case my family needed me. As I sat at an outdoor cafe in a small Tuscan village, sipping a glass of wine and watching the world go by, I thought about the lakeside lodge. I thought about the money I had spent and the money I had saved. The cost of that aborted weekend was more than enough to fund this entire 2-week trip, with plenty left over. I had traded 1 weekend of performative family happiness for 2 weeks of genuine, soul-deep peace. It was the best deal I had ever made. I no longer thought of what I did as an act of revenge. Revenge is a hot, all-consuming fire. What I had done was more like a controlled demolition. I had identified a structure that was unsafe, unstable, and toxic. A structure that was threatening to collapse on top of me, and I had carefully, methodically taken it down. Now, on the cleared ground where the gilded cage once stood, I was free to build something new. A life of my own design, on my own terms, with a foundation made not of obligation and guilt, but of self-respect. The calls never came again. My phone remained quiet, and in that silence I finally found my own voice.